The metal examination table felt cold against Zara's skin as purple lights pulsed overhead, casting eerie shadows across the sterile chamber. She tried to move, but the restraints held firm, just as they had every day for the past 6 months since they had taken her from her grandmother's garden in rural Pennsylvania. The memory of that autumn afternoon felt like a dream now, the crunch of leaves under her feet, the smell of ripening apples, and then the blinding light that had changed everything. A door hissed open somewhere behind her head. The familiar sound of chitinous legs clicking against metal flooring made her pulse quicken. The Varian scientists had returned for another round of tests. Their tall, mantis-like forms loomed over her, compound eyes refracting the purple light into kaleidoscopic patterns. Subject 274 continues to show remarkable adaptability. One of them clicked in their strange language, a language she shouldn't have been able to understand, but somehow now could. Increase the dosage by 30%. Zara bit back a whimper. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her fear, even as they prepared another syringe of the shimmering blue liquid that burned like fire in her veins. She was 12 years old, but in the past 6 months, she had learned to be steel. The lead scientist, whom she had mentally named Scarred Face for the distinctive mark across his carapace, leaned closer. "Your species is fascinating," he clicked. "So fragile, yet so resilient. Most subjects don't survive past the 3rd treatment. You've endured 15. The needle pierced her arm, and the familiar fire began to spread. But this time, something was different. Instead of the usual burning agony, the sensation crystallized into something else, a surge of energy that made every nerve ending tingle with awareness. The room suddenly seemed sharper, clearer. She could hear the hum of machinery 3 chambers away, smell the metallic tang of the air filtration system, feel the microscopic vibrations of the facility's power core deep beneath them. Through the haze of new sensations, Zara noticed something else. The restraints that had always been unbreakable now felt possible. She kept her breathing steady, trying to maintain the same defeated expression she had worn for months. Inside, her mind raced with possibilities. The scientists continued their observations, making notes on floating holographic displays. They didn't notice the slight movement of her fingers, testing the strength needed to break free. They didn't see the new calculations running behind her eyes, distance to the door, guard patrol patterns she had memorized, ventilation shaft access points. Remarkable, Scarred Face clicked, reviewing the data streams. The genetic modifications are achieving full integration. Cognitive functions are expanding exponentially. He reached out with one of his smaller appendages to adjust a sensor on her temple. Soon will begin phase 2. Zara caught fragments of images from his mind as he touched her, laboratories full of other human children, failed experiments, successful ones that had become something no longer human. She saw the Varians' plans, their need to create the perfect hybrid soldiers for their wars against rival species. The images filled her with equal parts horror and rage. A younger scientist approached with another syringe. "The control group is ready for comparison testing," it clicked. "Shall we proceed with the neural mapping?" Scarred Face made a gesture of approval. "Begin the sequence." And increased the containment field. Even failed subjects have shown increased strength during this phase. They still didn't see her as a threat, just another experiment, another data point in their vast research. But as they prepared their instruments, Zara felt the changes within her crystallizing into something new. The burning in her veins had transformed into a kind of liquid strength. Her senses had expanded beyond anything human, and with them came an understanding of just how much she had been changed. She heard the containment field powering up, felt the subtle shift in the air's electrical charge. The timing would have to be perfect. Too soon, and the field would contain her. Too late, and the neural mapping would begin, potentially destroying what was left of her human consciousness. Scarred Face raised a medical instrument that hummed with dangerous energy. Commencing neural mapping in 3, 2. Zara moved. The restraints shattered like glass as she launched herself upward with strength that would have been impossible hours ago. The younger scientist went flying across the room, its exoskeleton cracking against the wall. Scarred Face barely had time to reach for the alarm before her foot connected with his head in a kick that contained months of stored rage. Warning klaxons began to blare as she sprinted for the door. Guards would be coming, but she could hear them long before they arrived, could sense their movements through the vibrations in the floor. The changes they had forced upon her would become their undoing. As she ran through the sterile corridors, dodging energy bolts and leaping over barriers with inhuman agility, a grim smile crossed her face. They had wanted to create the perfect weapon. Instead, they had created their own nightmare. She wasn't their subject anymore, she was their reckoning. The facility's massive walls loomed ahead, but beyond them lay the alien wilderness of Nexus 7. She could smell it, a strange mix of toxic spores and bioluminescent flora. It would be dangerous, but anything was better than remaining a test subject. As she prepared to make her break for freedom, Zara made a silent promise to herself and to the other children still trapped in the laboratories behind her: she would return, and when she did, she would burn this place to the ground. The air burned in Zara's lungs as she raced through the bioluminescent wilderness of Nexus 7. Behind her, the Varian research facility's alarms continued to howl, their sound carrying far across the alien landscape. The forest itself seemed to pulse with life, trees that resembled giant mushrooms glowed with veins of blue light, while strange creatures scattered at her approach. Her newly enhanced senses were both a blessing and a curse. Every sound, every smell, every subtle movement in the underbrush came at her with overwhelming intensity. The genetic modifications the Varian had forced upon her were still settling, making her body feel like a stranger's. But they had also given her the strength and speed she needed to stay ahead of her pursuers. The whir of hovercrafts echoed through the canopy above. Searchlights cut through the mist, creating shifting patterns on the forest floor. Zara ducked beneath a massive fallen trunk, its surface covered in phosphorescent moss. She could hear the chittering communications of Varian search parties, their mantis-like forms moving through the forest with practiced efficiency. The subject is heading northeast, one clicked. Vital signs indicate elevated stress but stable genetic modifications. Priority is capture, not termination. Zara pressed herself deeper into the shadows, trying to control her breathing. The mutations had enhanced her hearing to the point where she could track the searcher's movements, but it also meant every snapping twig and rustling leaf threatened to overwhelm her concentration. She needed to think, to plan, but the cacophony of the alien forest made it difficult to focus. A new sound caught her attention, the soft padding of feet approaching from her left. Not Varian, something else. She tensed, preparing for another threat, when a figure emerged from the underbrush. It was humanoid but clearly not human, its skin having a silvery, liquid metal quality that seemed to shift in the forest's bioluminescent light. Its eyes glowed with an inner fire, and when it spoke, the words formed directly in her mind. "You are not ready for this world, young warrior," it said. "The forest will kill you before the Varian can recapture you." Zara remained crouched, ready to run. "Who are you?" "I am Thex, of the Luminari. We have watched the Varian's experiments with great interest." The being's form rippled like mercury. "And great disgust." A searcher passed overhead, and Thex pulled her deeper into the shadows with surprising gentleness. "Your mutations are unstable," it continued. "Without proper guidance, they will overwhelm your system within days." "Why should I trust you?" Zara demanded, though she could feel the truth in its words. Her body was burning up from the inside, every cell screaming with the changes being forced upon it. Thex's expression shifted in a way that might have been a smile. "Because, child of Earth, we have been fighting the Varian's biological warfare program for centuries. You are not their first victim, but you could be among their last." The sound of pursuit grew closer. Zara weighed her options: trust this strange being or take her chances alone in a lethal alien ecosystem. Before she could decide, her body made the choice for her. A wave of pain dropped her to her knees as her mutations surged, causing her skin to ripple with patterns of bioluminescence. Vex caught her before she hit the ground. "Your humanity is fighting the changes," it explained. "I can help you find balance, teach you to control what they've done to you. But we must reach sanctuary before the suppressants in your system wear off completely." Through gritted teeth, Zara managed to ask, "There are others?" "Yes. Not many survive the experiments, but those who do have found refuge with us. Some have even learned to use their modifications to fight back." Vex's head tilted, listening to something beyond human hearing. "The Varian are changing their search pattern. We must move now." A distant explosion rocked the forest, followed by the screech of twisting metal. Vex's expression brightened. "Ah, right on time. The Resistance never misses an opportunity to bloody the Varian's nose." "Resistance?" Zara asked as Vex helped her to her feet. "A story for safer locations. For now, we must reach the underground networks before your presence draws more attention. The forest is already responding to your unstable energy signature." As if to emphasize the point, several nearby plants suddenly turned toward them, their glowing pods pulsing with hungry interest. In the distance, something large moved through the canopy, attracted by the commotion. Vex produced a small device that projected a shimmering field around them. "This will mask our energy signatures temporarily, but we must hurry. The path to sanctuary is treacherous, and the night brings hunters that even the Varian fear." Together they moved deeper into the forest, away from the search parties and toward whatever sanctuary Vex promised. Zara's mind raced with questions, but survival took precedence. She could feel her body continuing to change, could sense new abilities awakening with each passing minute. The Varian had meant to create a weapon, but they never considered what would happen if that weapon found allies. As they descended into a hidden ravine, Zara caught glimpses of movement in the shadows, other figures with the same liquid metal appearance as Vex, standing guard over a concealed entrance. The Resistance, she presumed, though she sensed some of them were more like her, changed, enhanced, but still fundamentally human. "Welcome," Vex said as the hidden door slid open, "to the first day of your new war." The underground sanctuary of the Luminari stretched through a vast network of crystalline caves, their walls glowing with the same ethereal light that seemed to emanate from their hosts. Zara lay on a bed of bioluminescent moss as Vex and others of its kind worked to stabilize her mutations. Her body felt like it was being torn apart and reassembled at a molecular level. "The Varian's arrogance will be their undoing," an elder Luminari named Ves observed, its silver form rippling with concern. "They splice genes without understanding the consequences, create weapons without considering their potential for rebellion." Through waves of pain, Zara watched geometric patterns of light dance across her skin. "How many others are there like me? Among humans?" "7 have survived the experiments," Vex answered, placing a cool hand on her forehead. "Each altered in different ways. The Varian are nothing if not thorough in their research." A scream tore from her throat as another surge of changes ripped through her. The cave walls seemed to pulse in response, and several crystals cracked from the energy she was emanating. The Luminari stepped back, their forms shifting defensively. "Her power levels are unprecedented," Ves noted. "The Varian have outdone themselves this time. Or perhaps," came a new voice, "they've finally made their fatal mistake." Zara turned her head to see a tall human woman emerge from a side tunnel. Like Zara, there was something altered about her, evident in the way her eyes seemed to shift color and the faint patterns that moved beneath her skin. She introduced herself as Raven, one of the first survivors of the Varian experiments. "I know what you're going through," Raven said, kneeling beside her. "The pain, the fear, the feeling that your humanity is slipping away. But what they did to us doesn't define who we are. It only gives us the power to fight back." Over the next several days, as Zara's mutation stabilized, Raven and the other survivors helped her understand her new abilities. Each of them had been changed in unique ways. Some could manipulate energy, others could communicate with the living technology of Nexus 7, and a few had developed capabilities that defied explanation. Zara's own mutations had given her enhanced physical capabilities and something more, a deep connection to the quantum field that the Varian used in their experiments. She could sense energy patterns, predict probability flows, and even influence the behavior of certain particles. The Varian had intended to create a perfect infiltration unit, but they had instead created something far more dangerous. The facility where they held you wasn't the only one, Raven explained during a training session. There are dozens scattered across Nexus 7, each conducting their own experiments on captured species. The Varian believe they can engineer the perfect soldier by combining traits from across the galaxy. Why haven't the Luminari stopped them? Zara asked, practicing her control by levitating small crystals. The Luminari are peacekeepers, not warriors. They offer sanctuary and healing, but they cannot directly intervene without risking full-scale war. That's why they help us instead. We're already considered contaminated by the Varian's experiments. Our actions can't be traced back to any specific species. The crystals danced in complex patterns as Zara's confidence grew. So we're fighting a guerrilla war. We're fighting for survival, Raven corrected. And for justice. Every child they take, every species they corrupt, brings them closer to achieving their goal. We can't let that happen. During her recovery, Zara learned more about the others. There was Jean, who could merge with and control machinery, Kai, whose mutations allowed him to process and filter the toxic atmosphere of Nexus 7, and twins Nova and Astra, who could generate and manipulate plasma fields. Each had their own story of capture and transformation, their own reasons for fighting. But it was the youngest survivor, a 9-year-old girl named Rose, who truly showed Zara what was at stake. Rose's mutations had given her the ability to see possible futures, but the gift had come at a terrible cost. Her dreams were filled with visions of what would happen if the Varian succeeded in their plans, endless armies of hybrid soldiers, entire species transformed into living weapons, the concept of free will becoming extinct. The changes never really stop, Rose told her one evening, her eyes reflecting the cave's crystalline light. They just become part of who you are. The trick is making sure that who you are doesn't get lost in what they made you to be. As Zara's training progressed, the Resistance began planning their next move. The Varian would be adapting their security protocols following her escape, but they had also revealed a crucial weakness, their confidence in their own superiority. They never expected their experiments to develop consciousness beyond their programming, never imagined their weapons could turn against them. Tomorrow, Raven announced during a strategy session, we begin the real fight. The Varian think they're creating an army? Let's show them exactly what that army can do. That night, as Zara lay in her chamber watching the bioluminescent patterns dance across the ceiling, she thought about everything she had lost, her home, her normal life, her unchanged human body. But she also thought about what she had gained, strength, purpose, and a family forged in the crucible of shared suffering and determination. The Varian had wanted to create the perfect weapon. Instead, they had created their own Judgment Day, one mutation at a time. The night air of Nexus 7 shimmered with toxic spores as Zara crouched beside Raven on a ridge overlooking the Varian research facility. Unlike the one she had escaped from, this complex was built like a fortress, its crystalline towers stretching toward the planet's twin moons. Security drones patrolled in precise patterns, their sensors sweeping the perimeter for any sign of intrusion. Jin's in position, Raven whispered, her altered eyes glowing faintly as she received the telepathic confirmation. Kai has neutralized the atmospheric defenses, and the twins are ready with the diversion. Zara nodded, feeling the quantum field fluctuate around them. Her powers had grown exponentially over the past weeks of training, allowing her to not just sense energy patterns but manipulate them. Tonight, they would put everything they had learned to the test. Remember, Raven continued, this isn't just about freeing the prisoners. We need to access their central database. Rose's visions showed something bigger than individual experiments. The Varian are building towards something specific. The plan was complex but necessary. While Nova and Astra created a diversion on the facility's eastern perimeter, Jean would interface with the security systems through the maintenance tunnels. Kai's unique biology would allow him to safely transport the rescued prisoners through Nexus 7's toxic atmosphere, while Zara and Raven headed for the central laboratory. A series of explosions suddenly lit up the night sky as the twins began their attack. Plasma bolts arced between the security towers, creating a spectacular light show that drew the facility's defenders to the wrong location. Through her enhanced senses, Zara could hear the chaos erupting inside, alarms blaring, Varian soldiers chittering orders, heavy equipment being moved into defensive positions. Now, Raven commanded, and they moved. Zara's mutations gave her speed and agility that would have seemed impossible months ago. She scaled the facility's walls like a spider, her fingers finding microscopic holes in the seemingly smooth surface. Raven moved beside her with equal grace, their bodies almost invisible thanks to the chameleonic properties of their tactical suits. They entered through a ventilation shaft that Kai had already cleared of toxic spores. Inside, the facility was a maze of sterile corridors and secured laboratories. But Zara had memorized the layout from Jin's stolen schematics, and her quantum sense allowed her to detect patrols before they arrived. Security hub, 2 levels down, she whispered, feeling the concentrated energy signatures. Heavy encryption on the doors, but nothing like what they had at the other facility. They never upgraded their systems after my escape. Raven's smile was predatory. Their arrogance makes them vulnerable. They still think of us as experiments, not threats. They encountered their first real resistance at the security hub, a squad of Varian guards armed with neural disruptors. But the weapons that would have incapacitated normal humans had little effect on their enhanced physiologies. Zara moved like water through their attacks, her quantum manipulation allowing her to predict and avoid every shot. Raven's own mutations manifested as waves of disorienting energy that left the guards unconscious before they could raise the alarm. Jean, we're in position, Raven communicated telepathically. Begin data extraction. Through the facility's cameras, they watched as other parts of their plan unfolded. The twins had drawn most of the external forces into a running battle that kept them far from the real objective. Kai was already leading the first group of rescued prisoners, mostly children from various species, through the safe routes they had prepared. But it was what they found in the central database that changed everything. Project Chimera, Zara read from the holographic displays. They're not just creating weapons, they're trying to engineer a completely new species. One that combines the most dangerous aspects of every race they've experimented on. Raven's expression darkened as she scanned through the files. And they're succeeding. Look at these genetic sequences. They're stable, viable. They're planning to replace entire populations with their engineered soldiers. A sudden explosion rocked the facility. Through the security feeds, they saw a new group of Varian forces arriving, heavily armored troops unlike anything they had encountered before. Leading them was a figure Zara recognized immediately, scarred face, the scientist from her original captivity. They're using prototype hybrids, Raven warned the team. Fall back to extraction points. Jean, do you have what we need? Data secured, Jin's voice echoed in their minds. But they're blocking our exit routes. These new troops, they're different. Enhanced. Zara watched the hybrid soldiers move on the security feeds. They displayed impossible speed and strength, their movements precise and coordinated. The Varian had already succeeded in creating their perfect soldiers. They were just waiting to mass-produce them. We need a new plan, Zara said, her mind racing through possibilities. They're not just going to let us walk out with their research. Raven touched her arm. What are you thinking? They made us into weapons, Zara replied, her skin beginning to glow with quantum energy. Let's show them exactly what their weapons can do. The chamber's lights flickered as Zara reached out with her powers, feeling the quantum field that permeated the facility. The Varian used it for their experiments, drawing energy from the very fabric of reality. But they had never imagined that one of their subjects would learn to control it. "Everyone, get clear," she commanded through the telepathic link. "I'm about to give them a demonstration they'll never forget." As alarms blared and hybrid troops closed in, Zara prepared to unleash everything she had learned. The Varian had wanted to create the future of warfare. Instead, they had created their own destruction. The quantum field rippled around Zara like a living thing, responding to her will in ways the Varian had never imagined possible. Scarface and his hybrid troops breached the security hub just in time to witness what their experiments had truly created. "Fascinating," the scientist clicked, his compound eyes reflecting the energy that now surrounded his former test subject. "You've exceeded all projected parameters. Perhaps we underestimated human adaptability." "You underestimated everything about us," Zara responded, her voice echoing with power. The quantum energy pulsed with each word, creating ripples in reality itself. The hybrid soldiers moved with supernatural speed, but Zara was already operating on a different level. She could see the quantum threads that bound their enhanced bodies together, could perceive the weak points in their genetic engineering. With a gesture, she unraveled the forces holding three of them together, their forms dissolving back into base matter. "Impossible," Scarface chittered, backing away. "The quantum field cannot be manipulated at that scale without." "Without what?" Zara advanced, the floor cracking beneath her feet. "Without your precious machines. Without your controlled environments. You gave us these powers but never stopped to consider what we might become once we learned to use them." Through her telepathic link, she could sense the others completing their objectives. Kai and Jean had evacuated the last of the prisoners, while Nova and Astra maintained their defensive perimeter. Raven was downloading the final pieces of crucial data that would expose the Varian's plans to the galactic community. But Scarface wasn't finished. He pulled out a device that hummed with familiar energy, the same type they had used in their experiments. "You were our greatest success," he said, almost proudly. "But we planned for every contingency." The device activated, sending waves of disrupting energy through the quantum field. Zara felt her connection wavering, the power threatening to slip from her grasp. But then something unexpected happened. Rose's voice echoed in her mind, sharing a vision of the future, not just one possibility, but every potential outcome of this moment. "You see patterns," Rose's voice guided her. "But I see time itself. Let me show you how they all connect." Understanding flooded through Zara. The quantum field wasn't just a source of power, it was a bridge between all possibilities. The Varian had studied it for centuries but never truly understood it. They saw it as a tool, a weapon. But it was alive in its own way, and it had chosen her. With this new understanding, Zara reached deeper into the field than ever before. The disrupting waves from Scarface's device passed harmlessly through her as she accessed something far more fundamental. The hybrid soldiers froze in place as she suspended the quantum interactions holding their molecules together. "Your mistake," she told Scarface, "was thinking you could control evolution itself. Life finds its own path. We find our own path." The scientist's mandibles clacked in what might have been fear. "What are you?" "I'm what you made me," Zara replied. "And I'm what you feared we might become." With a thought, she collapsed the quantum field around the facility's power core. Chains of carefully controlled reactions began to break down. Alarms blared as the containment systems failed. "You'll destroy everything," Scarface warned. "All our research, all our progress." "No," Zara corrected him. "I'm setting it free." The evacuation was perfectly timed. As the facility began to tear itself apart at the quantum level, the resistance teams regrouped at their designated rally points. The rescued prisoners, dozens of children from various species, watched in awe as the fortress-like structure imploded, taking with it any chance of the Varian recreating their experiments. Hours later, in the safety of the Luminari Sanctuary, Zara stood with her found family as they planned their next moves. The data they had stolen revealed the locations of other facilities, other experiments. But more importantly, it provided proof of the Varian's violations of galactic law. The Luminari Council has already begun sharing the evidence with other species, Vex informed them. The Varian will face justice for their crimes. And the children? Zara asked, watching the rescued ones as they received medical care. They will be returned to their homes where possible, Raven answered. Those who were changed too much. She gestured to their own group, will find a home with us, if they choose. Rose approached Zara, her young face serious. I've seen what comes next, she said. The war isn't over. The Varian will try again, in other ways, on other worlds. Then we'll be ready, Zara replied, looking at her team, no, her family. They wanted to create the perfect warriors. Instead, they created their own redemption. The chambers of the sanctuary pulsed with bioluminescent light, a reminder of how far she had come from that garden in Pennsylvania. She was no longer just a 12-year-old girl, but she wasn't simply a weapon either. She was something new, something that would help shape the future of not just humanity, but all species who faced extinction at the hands of those who would play gods. In the end, the Varian's greatest experiment had succeeded, just not in the way they had intended. They had wanted to create beings of unlimited potential, never realizing that such potential had existed all along. It just needed the right catalyst to emerge. And as Zara looked out over the glowing forests of Nexus 7, she knew this was just the beginning. There would be more battles, more challenges, more children to save. But now they had something the Varian had never counted on: hope, purpose, and most importantly, each other. The war for the future had only just begun.